Hello everybody, this is Ari. Thank you for joining me today, and I'm so glad you took some time to learn about a new feature that we're calling time sculpting. And with that new feature comes a new set of rules in our templator settings effect under the category of time. And what this allows you to do as a template author is to make sure that your compositions change duration as any footage source durations change as well. And let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. All of these time sculpting rules can be combined for some sophisticated setups so that your comps can be truly dynamic. No need to worry about when your layers change duration. Templator will keep your compositions intact. No matter the complexity, Templator will intelligently rearrange your layers according to your time sculpting rules. So here we have 4 layers that are sequenced in a kind of stair-stepped, staggered fashion. If I go up here to my Templator panel and hit preview, what's going to happen is these layer sources are going to update, but you're going to see that the composition also changed in duration. So here we've got a 20-second composition. If I hit preview one more time, in this case we have a 30-second composition. So time sculpting allows you to make your composition more malleable, and it also allows you to determine where layers should be in your compositions depending on how their duration changes as the project reversions with new data. Okay, so what I'd like to do is dive deep into this project and start from a blank slate to show you how you build something like this up with these new rules. All right, so I've got After Effects open, ready to make a new project, and I also have some data that I've set up as well as some footage clips. So let's take a look. In the data set, this is a worksheet that we're going to use for this project that we're building. And you can see that for shot 1, shot 2, shot 3, and shot 4, we have these footage file references here. Now, if we look at our Finder, we can see that these footage files are here in this folder called footage. And you can see that these clips are prefixed with the runtime of the clip. So for example, if I preview this one, this is a 8-second clip, and you can see that it lasts 8 seconds and completes, it finishes. Okay, likewise, something like the 4-second one, this is 4 seconds long, 4 seconds is up, and it just terminates. So these are just some clips, but the important part is that they are prefixed with the duration. And that's just to help us understand a little bit more clearly about what we're doing here with these time-based rules and to clarify these examples. Okay, so we've got these footage clips, we've got these references to those footage clips, and now we're building the project. Okay, so let's go ahead and first save this project. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and do File, Save As, and we'll call this WiiU console.aep. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and go to File, Import File to import a single footage clip, and I'm gonna click this one right here and choose Open. And now I have this footage clip sitting in my project. So if we just double click, you can see it's a 12-second long clip from some gameplay on Paper Mario Color Splash. A really, really fun game. Oh my gosh, what a great, beautiful game. Okay, so we're going to make a new composition, and we're gonna make this footage item into a layer. So let's go ahead and do composition, new composition, and I'm gonna go ahead and call this segments. And I'm gonna click OK. And I'll drag this footage item to this composition to make it into a layer. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna map some data to this layer so that we can easily swap out the footage source of this layer. So let's take a look at how we do that. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and click on Google here to connect this project to the spreadsheet that we saw earlier. So I click on the WiiU worksheet here. So I click OK. And then for the footage folder, since they're just file name references, we just have to find the root of where these files are, and that's it right there. It's already selected for us. And then the output folder is just a hop, skip, and a jump over, and there's the output. Okay, so our batch assets are now set up correctly. The next step is to apply the templator settings effect to this layer. So we go to Effect, Dataclay, Templator Settings. Now, once it's applied, it effectively marks the layer as a dynamic one. And to complete the data mapping process, what we do is we rename this layer to one of the column headers that makes sense for this layer. So this is a footage layer. And so what we're going to do is go over to our data set. And you can see here we've got this column called shot 1. Well, this is the layer name that we need to use in our project. So we go back to our project and we click on this layer, hit the enter key to rename it, and we're going to call this shot-1. Okay, that is the completion of the data mapping process. Now what we can do is we can actually see how this mapping looks within our composition. So the way we do that is we first determine a range of rows to iterate through or to walk through. So in this field right here, I'm going to enter row 2. That's the start row that I want to begin at. And then 25 is the end row. So if we go over here, we can see that we only have row 2 through 25. So that's the entire data set. Okay. The next thing we should look at is the preview uses drop down here. So we want to use the next row every time we click preview. So now when I click preview, we should see the source here for this shot 1 layer change. Let's go ahead and try. And there we go. So we certainly know that the source changed because the duration changed here. So we also see here in our status window in the templator panel that it finished previewing row 2 with this ID. Now, when I hit preview again, what happens is templator gets the next row from within that range that I've put here. So I'm going to click on preview and we should see the source change once more. And it tells me that it finished previewing row 3, and I hit preview again and we finish previewing row 4, and so on and so forth. All right, so now that we see that the data is mapped, what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this layer to get 4 footage elements that are also mapped dynamically. So let's go ahead and select the layer, and we're going to do Command D to duplicate, and we're going to do it 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. So now we have 4 shots here. And yes, they are all the same source for now, but you can see that After Effects did rename this shot for us properly. So we have shot 1, shot 2, shot 3, and shot 4. So if we go back to the spreadsheet, we can see that we also have these columns that are labeled shot 1, shot 2, shot 3, and shot 4. So this is perfect. So now that they all have the templator settings effect applied to them and they're renamed correctly, I'm just going to go ahead and hit preview, and we should see these sources change. And sure enough, they do. So I hit preview again, and there we go. So now they're all being mapped to the correct column in the spreadsheet. So what I want to do is sequence these layers one after the other. So select shot 2, 3, and 4, open up the effects by hitting E on the keyboard and selecting each of these controls here, and then going into the effects controls panel, opening up the time group, going to the shift group. And what I want to do for each of these is I want their endpoints to shift to other layers out point. Okay, so basically what we're going to do now is go into each one. So I'm going to click on shot 2, and the shift target here is going to be shot 1. And then I'm going to click on the shot 3 effects controls, go into its shift group, and the shift target here is going to be shot 2. And then here I'm going to go into the effects controls and do the shift target to shot 3. Okay, so what I'm going to go ahead and do now is hit preview. And what we should see is these layers sequenced one after the other. Okay, the composition is being cut off, but we'll fix that in a little bit. But let's go ahead and preview again. And here we can see that they are, in fact, aligned perfectly. So basically what's happening is these rules here in the shift group allow you to shift the layer. And you should check out the layer shifting screencast for more details. So what we're going to do here, though, is, because when we go from one row to the next, sometimes it gets cut off, we're going to click on shot 4. And we're going to make sure that the comp ends at its out point. So we check mark this parameter here. I'm going to open that up. You can see comp ends at out point. So because that's checked, it doesn't matter where this layer ends up. The comp will always be cropped to wherever this endpoint is here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit preview, and what we'll see is a really nicely organized composition. And actually we're not, because you can see here we haven't preserved the end for this. So we're going to go into the trim group here, and we're going to do preserve end, and that means that the out point here will always match the end time of the layer of the source. Okay, so what we're going to do now is hit preview, and we'll see it for certain now be very nice and tidy. We have one after the other, and then this layer is now marking the end of the composition. So you can see here we have got a 16 seconds, and then here we have, let's zoom out on the timeline, and here we have a 32-second clip. We go to the next one, and here we have a 8-second clip. Okay, so you can see that the rules here allow you to dictate what layers should do in relationship to their sibling layers, and then also which layer is the demarcator for where the composition should end. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into the titles. I'm going to go ahead and hit preview again to get to a longer composition. And yes, we do love the NES. Thanks very much. And what we're going to do is we are going to insert a pre-comp. And the pre-comp is generated by this awesome tool called Animation Composer by Mr. Horse. And we have these pre-comps here, and we're going to go to titles and lower thirds, and then we're going to go to blur style 1, and then text, and then text 3 placeholder left. So we're going to use this one. So what we do here is we just drag that pre-comp into this area of the Animation Composer panel, let go, and then that just appears magically into the composition that we were currently on. So thanks, Animation Composer. You're awesome. Okay, so what I want to do here is edit these text layers, but I don't really want to edit them directly. I want to map data to them. So let's dig into this composition that Animation Composer created and see if we can do that. So I'm going to double click on this. Now we can see these 3 text layers here, introducing Animation Composer, Filmmaker's best friend. So what we want to do is first apply the templater settings effect to these text layers, so that marks them as dynamic. So we go to Effect, Dataclay, Templater Settings. Great. The next step is to rename these layers. So we go to our data sheet, and we can see I want to have the runtime, a main title, and a subtitle. So I'm going to go ahead, go back here, and for this text layer, I'm going to rename it to runtime. Then for this one, I'm going to go ahead and rename this main-title. And then for this one, we'll go ahead and rename it sub-title. All right. So now that we've mapped the data to these text layers, let's take a look at how it will work inside of our composition. So we go back to the segments composition, and let's go ahead and hit preview, and this will get the next row's data. And there we go. We have the runtime, we have a main title and a subtitle, but we can see there are some issues here. We've got some masking problems that we'll need to fix as well. But before we continue, let's just go ahead and cycle through the previews to see, if there's any other problematic data. Okay, looking good. Looking good. Okay, there's a problem there. Okay, so we have a couple of issues, and we're just going to lengthen some of this masking that the pre-comp has. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll double click this composition, and let's go ahead and do the previous row here. And that's where we had an issue. And what we're going to do is fix this problem right here. We're going to move this anchor point right here so that it's at the bottom left corner. So I'm going to go ahead and shift drag this so it's to the left. And then I'm also going to do it for this layer right here, the shape layer 2. There's also another anchor point, so I'm going to click and drag that one to the left as well. Okay, now that they are there, I can then extend them by this area. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is click both of them and use my move tool to kind of drag them in unison. And if I go back to my segments, I can see that it's actually updating. So click there. Okay, perfect. Now let's make sure this title is actually queuing in at about 3 seconds. So we're going to advance to 3 seconds on the time indicator and then shift drag this layer till it snaps to the indicator here. Okay, so we're guaranteed that after 3 seconds in our movie, we will then see the reveal for this title, and we will get some information and it'll go away. Okay, So let's go to the next row and hit preview. Okay, so here we're getting another Paper Mario, Ruddy Road, 26 seconds long. Okay, so you can see that, in fact, this composition is 26 seconds long, but we see that these clips are staggered in such a way where it's just cutting one after the other. So instead of having these layers cut, let's try and have them transition in a really interesting way. So it's not just stark cuts like one to the next. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is select all of these layers here, and we're going to go to the effects for templater settings, and we're going to go ahead and select all of them. And what we'll do is we're going to set the shift overlap to 15. So we want to see how this parameter affects our timeline. So we'll go over to the preview uses dropdown and change this to current state, which will allow us to see how this parameter affects these layers without having the sources update. Okay, so if we click on preview now, let's take a look at what happens to these endpoints for these layers that are highlighted. All right, so we can see that now there's some overlap in their shifting in the timeline. So the overlap allows you to make sure that your endpoints and outpoints shift to specific places in your timeline. But with this overlap parameter, you can have some compensation in that alignment. Okay, so let's go to preview uses next row. And if we click preview, you're going to see these layers update. And also they have the overlap in their shifting rules. So now we can do some transition work. If I go to animation, I have this preset that I saved that's 15 frames long. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is move my time indicator to the beginning of each layer, and I will then apply that preset. So I have this layer, I've moved my time indicator to the beginning of the layer, and now I'm going to go ahead and do animation, recent animation presets, and glitch. Okay, so basically if I hit U, we can see what the only parameter that's really keyed is this mix right here. So let's go ahead and just make the work area start here and end there. And let's build this up to see what it actually looks like. And there's our transition from one clip to the next. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that for the other layers. So let's go to the endpoint of this one and do animation, apply the preset. We know that that preset is 15 frames long. So, you know, the transition is going to remain intact. And let's do it for this one as well. Animation, recent, and the glitch transition. So now if we look, we can see that all of them are using the transition from the Red Giant plugin. So regardless of how the layers get reversioned, this transition work will always remain in place. Okay, so for example, if I hit preview on the next row here, we'll see that the transitions still remain. Okay, so if we zoom out here, and let's make our work area there and there, we can see that the transitions, 15 frame long transitions, are still intact. All right, so that looks great. And, you know, it's just a really nice, handy parameter considering the overlap, because you can do some really cool stuff in terms of transitioning from one dynamic layer to another. And you don't have to worry about what is going to happen to your transition work if a layer happens to be, you know, really, really long in one version, and then in another version, it's really short. Okay, so that is the reason why we have these overlap parameters. And it's not just exclusive to the shift group. You can see that the trim group also has an overlap parameter, as well as the out point trim, and the stretch also has an overlap parameter, and these are all frame based. Okay, so what we're going to do is to add just a little bit of polish, and to kind of wrap things up, we are going to take this composition and place it into a parent composition. So let's go ahead and do composition, new composition, and then we'll call this render. And let's click OK. And let's go to our project here and drag the segments pre-comp that we've been working on right into here. Okay, So you can see it automatically is a problem here because it's getting cut off. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply the templator settings effect to this layer. So I go to Effect, Templator Settings, and I'm going to go to Time, and then I'm going to say that the comp ends at the out point. Okay. So now when I hit Preview Next Row, everything internal in this segment's composition is going to version out. And now that it gets changed, the pre-comp also gets updated because I have the templator settings effect applied. Okay, so to add the polish, we're going to operate on this pre-comp layer. So we're going to just animate the scale parameter so it kind of scales back. Hang tight, everybody. We are going warp speed to the good parts. All right. So let's go ahead and go to preview. And what that's going to do is kind of show us that, we have a brand new video. And this one happens to be 24 seconds long, and that's okay. Now, we do notice here that the date and the gray solid need to be increased. So what we're going to do is we are going to apply the templator settings effect to this solid layer. So go to Effect, Templator Settings, and we're going to go ahead and change it so that the trim, so that the out point trims to an out point, and we want to target the segments layer because that's the one that is changing. Okay, and then the date layer has the templator settings effect already, so we're going to go into it, go to the trim as well, and do the same thing. We're going to target the segments layer, and then we're going to trim to the out point of the segments layer. So now when I hit preview, these two layers will always fill up the duration of the composition. So let's take a look. Okay, so that's the start row. Click next row. And here you can see that it's 14 seconds and 18 frames, and then it filled up. Click again. And we also have it here. So it's a nice thing to be able to have these rules because layers can interact with each other. Okay, so that's it. And thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, feel free to hit up our forums, send us an email. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Don't forget to click to subscribe to our channel so you can learn the latest techniques for automating your video production process. I'm Ari Stapchansky, signing off. Thanks again.